These words in 1 Samuel bring us into a new day for the people of Israel. Last week, as we were at Mount Sinai, moving from Mount Sinai, we move into the Promised Land this week. And most of you know the story, or you know a little bit about the story. The story that we know is a story of them coming into the Promised Land and the people desiring a king. They want to be like the other people. And they desire this king, and they ask God for a king, and we enter in the days of Judges. And as we enter into the days of Judges, they're just a mess. The days of the Judges are a mess. And so we end the book of Judges with a verse, and most times when I preach on this, I use this verse because I think it just encompasses so much of what we understand about the book of Judges. But the very last verse in the book of Judges is this: in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right to him. This is where we pick up this story. If you flip back to Judges, you see that verse, you go through one little short book of Ruth, and after Ruth, we move right into 1 Samuel, into the passage that we just heard. And so as we come into this passage, 1 Samuel is going to bring us some of the names that we know, the names that we know of Saul, of David. We move into 2 Samuel, we move into Kings, and we're going to hear those names of Saul, David, moving into Solomon. And so this brings in the day of the Kings. It is a new day in Israel. And the new day in Israel is a day that's first introduced to us through the words of a woman who is hurt, a woman who is barren, a woman who has no hope. We enter into these words, and I want to just kind of take a moment and look at some of the passage and then kind of dig a little deeper into it. And so we're going to be at 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're going to look at just 9, 10, 11, just 3 verses, because I know y'all have heard, you've heard these verses already. Verse 9 says, "On one occasion, Hannah got up, and after they ate and drank at Shiloh, the priest Levi was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Deeply hurt, Hannah prayed." This word, or this statement, deeply hurt, I think it's worth a moment just kind of pausing here to kind of go through what does this mean for Hannah, but what does it mean for us? CSB here translates it deeply hurt. If you're reading King James, she was suffering from a bitterness of her soul. The NLT, as we just heard, is deep anguish. The Message, she is crushed in her soul. This is a great place for us to enter into this story, and it is a great place for us to kind of ask some questions of ourselves. What are those moments in our lives we have been deeply hurt? Those moments of pain that we walk through. We are people, I think probably most of us, and I know most of you, most of us are people that we just have our desire in life is there is a problem. What do you do with a problem? Come on, somebody. What do you do with a problem? You fix it. Y'all know Richard. Richard, if there's a problem, he's going to fix it, right? That's the way most of us are wired. There is a problem, you fix it. You come up with another problem, what do? You fix it. We are fixers by nature. Most of us are fixers by nature, but there are times in our lives there is nothing that we can do. It's in those moments that we hear Hannah say to us, from the deep hurt of her soul. So many of us have been through these moments. There are moments that have in our lives where we can't control them. We can't fix the problem. I know in my life, there are 2 that come to mind that most of you that know me. First off, my mom's dementia. As we saw her cognitive decline, there was nothing we could do to fix it. But watch. Watch the pain of losing someone who is still alive. When my cousin Chris was diagnosed with cancer, it all escalated very, very quickly. From a diagnosis to a funeral in less than 12 months. And there were moments. There were moments that I spent at these altars. There were moments of deep hurt and deep pain. I couldn't fix it. And you have those moments too. We all have those moments where we can't fix it. No matter how hard we try, we can't fix it. And I think it's at that moment where Hannah invites us into this story. Deeply hurt, Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept with many tears. Verse 11 goes on and says to us, making a vow, she pleaded, Lord of armies, if you will take notice of your servant's affliction, remember and not forget me. Give your servant a son. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut. Now, I hope some of you have been listening over the past couple weeks, and you hear this and you think, Pastor, that sounds like some things we've been talking about. Because last week I made a statement in my sermon. The statement I made in my sermon was this: we want to know, that's all of us, we want to know that we are loved, we are seen, we are heard, we are remembered and known by God. Every single one of us. We want to know we are loved, that we are seen, that we are heard, that we are remembered, that we are known by God. And Hannah, out of her anguish, out of her pain, comes to God and says, God, please just pay attention to me. See me. Hear me, remember me. I took the beginning of this verse and I kind of rewrote it. So this is John's paraphrase. This is not a translation. It's just my paraphrase. But I want you to see kind of the way that we could see this working in this verse. For Hannah to say, I am making a vow, Lord of armies. Please look at me and see my pain. Hear me, remember me, and make me known by answering my prayer and giving me a son. I think Hannah's prayer here could be for so many of us. Lord, look at me, see my pain, hear me, remember me, and make me known by answering my prayer. By giving me this. This is where so many of us come. This is where so many of us come into this story and begin to understand Hannah's pain, to understand the hurt and the pain that is happening. And then Hannah makes this promise at the end of the verse, and I will give him back. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. It is the passage we read at every single baby dedication. To be reminded, like Hannah, that we all know that the gifts that we have from God, all of our children are gifts. This morning is little Genevieve's first Sunday. She's been here on some Wednesday nights. Orion's trying to keep her quiet back there. But I believe if I called Orion and Gabby up right now and said to them, I just want you to know she is a beautiful little girl. It's not yours. She's not yours. She's a gift. And all of our children are gifts. All of our children are a gift to us, a gift from God. I had heard a statement a couple weeks ago, and I don't know, this isn't in my notes, so I don't know if I shared this in a sermon, so if I did, I apologize, but you need to hear it again, even if I did. But the person made the statement, there is no such thing as a bad child. There are only children who have suffered from trauma. And to me, that's something I've been thinking about a whole lot. because we know that we minister to a lot of different students and different children, and there are different things that are going on, but to know that every single child is a gift from God, and a beautiful, beautiful gift. And to see them for what they are, for a creation of God, and we as God's people get to shepherd that gift, get to be a part of that gift. So, this morning I have kind of two different statements I want to make. One are some truths that we learn from Hannah's story, and then take a moment to kind of dig into these a little bit deeper. I had already written this sermon when something happened yesterday, and this is one of those things, like, it's kind of a weird, I don't know how to introduce this person, so we had lunch yesterday with what I call my cousin Dale. Dale is not my birth cousin. He is my birth cousin's ex-husband. So I don't know what that makes him, so it's just easier to call him my cousin. They were married 20 years. I still see him as part of the family. Legally, he's not. I don't care. He's still part of my family. So he was in town yesterday, so we had lunch with him, and Dale's been dealing with just a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on in his life that he would not want me to share with y'all. But one of the things Dale said to us, he's leading worship at a church for a youth group. And he said, one of the things as a worship leader is you are leading up to the sermon. And he said, I only get 2 or 3 kind of lines that I can say, just kind of between songs. John does that sometimes. He'll just say something. And Dale said, what I want more than anything else for those students is for me to be able to speak truth into their lives. That when they're adults and they look back, that they'll know that that guy that led worship for them told them the truth. Told them things about God that no matter what happens in their lives, they know it was the truth. So sometimes when I do this, I hadn't processed why I do this occasionally, but I thought it was a great way to say it. So what I want to do is I want to go through, I just have a few of truths that we see in the story of Hannah, and then I want to kind of dig into how that applies. All right? So, like Dale said yesterday, my goal is these are true, period. If you don't get anything else I say that you say, this is what Pastor John said and this is true. No matter what tomorrow holds, this is true. So here are some of those truths that we see in this story. The first one is that Hannah believed in the future that God could create. Even when her situation seemed barren and hopeless. Hannah believed in a future. And this future was a future that God was creating and had not yet created. But she believed in this future even in the moments where her situation seemed barren and hopeless. Another truth that we see is that God brings new life from barren places. That God brings new life from barren places. And that hope rises from hopelessness. And lastly, that despair is transformed into thanksgiving and praise. These 3 statements, and then kind of a side statement, are things that we see in this story that are true. This is what truth is. We serve a God who brings new life to the place where there is no life or where we think there is no life. God is a God who brings hope in the midst of hopelessness. God is a God who, even in our despair, even as I said earlier, in our bitterness of soul, our deep anguish, our crushing pain, even in those moments, God can transform those moments into thanksgiving and praise. So, there's some truths. So let's kind of dig down a little bit and talk a little bit more about kind of what does that mean for us. So what are some things that we can learn from Hannah? The first thing is that we learn the importance of bringing our deepest needs to God. Many of us struggle with this. Wednesday night in men's Bible study, Richard kind of mentioned this and talked about this, how in that group of men, there are some that have shared some deep hurts, there are some that have shared struggles, and there's quite a few that haven't, and that's okay. But to have a place where we can share those things, to have a place where we can admit, I don't have it all together. Part of the problem that we sometimes face as Christians is we think, if I'm going to present this image of a good Christian, that means that I've got it all together, everything in my life is wonderful, I've got it all figured out, I don't struggle with anything, that means I'm a good Christian, right? No. Thank you for shaking your head no. No. Every single one of us struggles. Every single one of us questions whether or not we have it all together. You are not alone. And Hannah teaches us that we bring our deepest needs to God. I have a good friend who this week, none of y'all know him, so don't try to figure out who it is. This week celebrated 10 years of sobriety. That is an incredible thing. And he posted on Facebook on his 10th anniversary the hurt that he has felt by being honest, the hurt he has felt by being vulnerable. And he pretty much summed the whole thing up by just saying, if you're out there and you're hurt and you're vulnerable, just don't do it. Don't tell anybody about your hurt. Now, thankfully, I have a good friend who's a pastor who commented, and his first line of his comment was, I'm going to push back on this. But somehow we're taught that when we are vulnerable, when we are open, when we show our hurts, we show weakness. We do not show weakness. We show that we're human. And Hannah is a reminder to us, every single one of us is human. Every single one of us struggles. Some struggles are bigger, some struggles we know about. When somebody in the church, when there's a struggle that goes on, I've said this to some of you, something bad has happened in your life, and I say to you, here is one of the favorite lies of the devil. They tell you you're the only person struggling in that church, and you need to go find something else because no one in that church is going to accept your struggle. That is a lie from the devil. What you need more than anything else is a church to love you, to support you, to remind you that God loves you, that you are known, that you are heard, that you are seen. And the devil does not want that to happen. What you need more than anything else is to have people that will come around, surround you in your deepest hurt, pray for you as we've already seen this morning. For you to be reminded that you are not alone. The second thing that we see is that new possibilities in our lives come from God, not from our efforts. That's a hard one. That new possibility in our lives come not because we have it all figured out. New possibility in our lives comes from what God is doing. That God is working, that God is alive. The next one. We learn the power of persistence and trust in claiming God's grace. Hannah boldly asks God to remember her. She passionately expresses her hopeful claim to the point where Eli thought she was drunk. In 2 Corinthians, chapter 5, one of my favorite chapters, Paul makes the statement to us, if we are out of our minds, it is for God. The better way to say that is if we are beside ourselves, if we are completely out of it. If people look at us and say, that person, Randy, he's just crazy. Randy would tell you, no, Mary, that was why I shouldn't have picked on Randy because Mary's going to support it. That Randy's just crazy, that y'all all know. No. Randy, I have dug a hole for you, and I apologize. That if this was a very, that if Randy, somebody else, who else wants to be, I picked the wrong person this morning, and now I don't know how to get out of it. All right. The things that we do, let's not talk about Randy anymore. How about that? That in our lives, when we have been captured by who God is, when we have been captured by what God is doing, that there are times that the world looks at us and says, they've lost it. They're crazy. And it's in those moments that we see how God is with us and God is working in the new possibility of life. We learn from to bring our deepest needs to God, and in doing that, we have new possibilities in our lives that come from God, not from our efforts. The second point, we learn the power of persistence and trust in claiming God's grace. And what do we learn in that? We learn new possibilities in our lives come from God, not from ourselves. That God is the one who is working. And then lastly, and I'll pull it all together, we learn that the right response to God's grace is to give it back. God's grace acting in your life is simply that, it is a gift. The very definition of grace reminds us we didn't do anything to deserve it. You didn't work harder to get more grace. God freely gives you grace. The truth of this statement changes our posture from what I have to everything that I have is a gift. My spouse, it's a gift. My children, they're a gift. My talents, they're a gift. My finances, it's a gift. My home, it's a gift. My life, it's a gift. My church, it's a gift. My family, it's a gift. My broken family, it's a gift. God's grace acting in my life, guess what? It's a gift. And Hannah reminds us that all that we have in life is a gift from God. But for so many of us, we struggle understanding that gift. We struggle living out that gift. We struggle acknowledging that gift. My hope and my prayer this morning is that hearing these words of 1 Samuel, hearing this story is a reminder to us that just like Hannah, every single one of us, we struggle. No matter how put together the person down the pew looks, no matter how put together your friends look, no matter how put together your boss looks, every single one of us struggle. Every single one of us understand what we mean by deepest hurt. And in the midst of that, Hannah says to us, in the midst of your pain, I want to tell you where to go. The place to go is to a God who hears you, a God who knows you, the God that we talked about last week that the Israelites wanted so bad, but were willing to give it up for an idol. That God is a God who says to you, I hear your plea. I hear you're brokenhearted. I hear that you don't think you're enough. But you are. Because everything that you have is a gift. Your life is a gift. And this brings Hannah to song. It brings Hannah to proclaim some of the greatest words prayed in our Bibles. I will put a footnote on this, and whenever I preach on this or I preach on the Magnificat, I say it every time. The two most beautiful prayers in our Bibles are both prayed by women, Hannah and Mary. And if you disagree, I'll fight you for it. No. They are incredible. And Hannah says these words to us, or these words in prayer to God. My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted up to the Lord. My mouth boasts over my enemies because I rejoice. Why? Because I rejoice in your salvation. I rejoice in what you have done in my life. I rejoice in the freedom that I have because of what my God has done. I rejoice because of the gift that I have been given, not just of a son, but I've been given a gift. The greatest gift that we could ever be given, and do you know what that is? It's to have a God that hears us, that remembers us, that knows us. And knowing that fact brings Hannah to song. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Do not boast so proudly or let arrogant words come out of your mouths, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and actions are weighed by him. The bows of the warriors are broken, but the feeble are clothed with strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for food. Those who are starving hunger no more. The woman who is childless gives birth to 7, and the woman with many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and gives life. He sends some down to Sheol and raises others up. The Lord brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the trash heap. He seats them with noble men and gives them a throne of honor. And verse 8 ends with these powerful words. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world on them. This morning as we close, I hope we take a moment to ask the question of what we learned from Hannah. To recognize that in our deepest hurts, in our deepest fears, in our deep anguish, that there is a God who knows, who hears, who listens, who remembers. To know that you don't have it all figured out. To know that I don't have it all figured out. But this world and my life is not up to me having it all figured out. But to have a God who Hannah says is sitting enthroned over all. My hope and my trust is not in me. My hope and my trust is not in you. My hope and my trust is in a God who is alive and who is working. A God who knows that true peace comes from trusting God because it is beyond our control. That new possibility in your life comes not from how hard you work, not from how much you want to fix it, but from a God. A God who we come to and say, here is my life. It is a gift. I want you to take it back. Do with me what you want to do. This morning as we close, we will close as we normally close. Pastor James will be right down at this altar. If you would like a pastor to pray with, James would love the opportunity to pray with you. I will be down at this altar right here. If you would like to be anointed for healing, physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever that might be, I would love the opportunity to be able to pray with you. But on the other side, there are other altars where you might just need to find a place. A place where you can just say to God, God, I'm living in that deep anguish. I'm living in that hurt. I understand Hannah's feelings. God, I need to be reminded of your truth. I need to be reminded that even in this pain, there is new possibility. That in a few moments when we read the words that barrenness doesn't get the last word, that hope does. We think of Hannah. And be reminded that this whole sequence of events for the kings starts with a woman saying to God, I'm done. I need you to show up. And maybe that's just what we need to say this morning. God, I need you to be there. Let us stand as we sing.